I mean, and I do kind of like. I think my, my position. I think Micah and Sean are both right. So that on the one hand, it is like on the one hand, for sure, right? The Stephen Jay Gould point applies, which is actually, interestingly enough, is the thought that the movie closes on. Is Coppola, that Hearts of Darkness closes on, is Coppola talking about how it's, I don't know when Hearts of Darkness was made exactly, but he's like, now that everybody has these little handheld, camcorders, maybe there's some 8-year-old girl somewhere who could become the, the Mozart of film, and, just blow everybody away with her artistic, genius. So at least in that case, hoping that technological development will, make it more egalitarian. But the core of the point is there. But at the same time, like, also this is, I mean, sure, more people should get a chance to do it, but like, this is also an amazing thing. And it's something that's even given me pause sometime thinking about the, what I'd like the structure of a post-capitalist economy to be
exactly.
Like.
Yes. This is where my mind went in watching the film, which will probably, given your next big project, Ben, I mean, this is the kind of thing that you guys are probably thinking about in terms of like market socialism or whatever. But like, yeah, what would it, how do we democratically decide who gets to make an apocalypse now in the future, right? Because like, this was not a democratic production, right? This is like Coppola the dictator, Coppola the wealthy dictator, who then is making deals with other dictators of a different kind, who then gets to make this movie because of that. And like, obviously every piece of that has these serious moral compromises, things that, I mean, we're literally witnessing this sort of machinery of death in the helicopters, which then you see in the documentary takes a detour from playing the machinery of death on screen to actually going and killing, Filipino peasants over here.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, like, it seems weird for me to sort of admit this to myself, but I'm grateful to Coppola that he managed to pull this off, despite all of the compromises that had to be made. That he had that clarity of vision, as well as the ability logistically to hold all the pieces together and pulled the thing off. But like, yeah, the question is how would you, if we lived in an actually democratic society where resources were allocated in a democratic way, how do we choose who gets the apocalypse now treatment? Who gets the absurd amount of resources to go and follow this crazy vision and pull something off like this? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. And once we have, right, like I actually do kind of think, thinking about examples like this, that we'd like, that maybe some, whatever cooperatives that, that make, they worker owned, American Zoetrope or whatever, that should actually should have, like, constitutionally, there should be people who maybe like you could have a variety of other decisions that wouldn't be in their hands, but like, I think you actually do want that artistically to have at least a sort of limited scope dictatorship, within something like the making of a movie. So yeah, that's a fascinating question. What that could look like and how that could fit into.
That's an equally decided dictatorship in some ways. Like in the sense of like people are volunteering to be part of that system. You know what I mean? Like, because you always hear about people like wanting to quit movies, and they do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a situation where it's like people working at like a fast food restaurant. They need that job to survive, and they're stuck. Like, it's people following a passion of theirs that kind of.
That's true. Even under the current system, there's much more meaningful freedom of exit and something like that, and there would presumably be way more, right, in a society where nobody's like, because there are people for whom movies or sports or other things that like might be like very elite professions but are still their way out of poverty. And so in a society without poverty, and you'd have even less of that. Still some tricky logistical questions, but again, I think that this example does show why this is worth thinking about. Those are logistical questions that you want to ask, right? Because you genuinely don't want to have movies that are that are made by by committee, to an even greater extent than what we already get in the Hollywood studio system, which is often bad enough.
Say, that already is a committee every time somebody wants to say. I think something I will say about filmmaking, even within this capitalist structure right now, and I don't say this about a lot of things, but technology has kind of democratized who gets to make movies, who gets to use these resources, not in the way that we would want as socialists necessarily, but the access to those resources have come into, like, it becomes easier and easier to make something, even if it's not something on the scale of Apocalypse Now, but it becomes easier and easier to make something, for yourself. You
can't make you can't make Apocalypse Now without an ungodly amount of money. That hasn't changed, but you can make like, if you're just making like an indie movie that's sort of quiet and realistic and doesn't have a lot of helicopters in it, you can make a pretty slick version of that, with a pretty low budget.
I mean, at some point there is always going to be some form of meritocracy in the sense of as people prove that they're able to do this kind of thing, like, because directing a movie is a very specific task. You know what I mean? It's a top down, very specific task, and there's always going to be some form of meritocracy probably in how much resources people get. But as socialists, everybody should have access to those resources in some form. They should, if that's something that they want to do, they should have, they should be able to get educated in it. They should be able to learn about it. They should be able to make a living off of it, even if that's not how resources to the scale of Apocalypse Now get distributed.
Yeah, fair enough. Ian Adelstein, thank you for the super chat. Says, I was in Tokaji, Hungary last year. They lamented that the legendary wine quality greatly declined during the Soviet-dominated period because they prioritized table wine. Of course, then again, to our point, there were some amazing movies made in the early Soviet Union. But yeah, look, I think that on the meritocracy point, I think we could also separate out a couple of things that which are competition for prestige and for resources being used for the sake of making something, with prestige, and distribution of resources in the sense that, like, it's not just that he had a lot of money at this point, that like Francis Ford Coppola can continue to be very rich, afterwards, because of the proceeds of this. I think I actually think that in a radically more egalitarian society, certain kinds of competition for prestige, might actually be more intense because they're the only remaining outlet, for those kind of, like, you can't have, if you're not actually competing for resources, prestige is the only game in town, and I'm kind of okay with that, right? Like, I don't want to live in a society where due to some combination of skills that happen to be useful in this particular society at this particular time, that different people are born with different levels of that, like, some people just can't have good lives, but I am comfortable, having some sort of, cutthroat meritocratic competition to see who, who's considered to be a legendary filmmaker, or who makes it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or, any of those things, yeah.
As Peter Coffin says a lot, like, attention is currency in the marketplace of ideas. Like, it's that's never gonna, like, you can never, in a future, even a utopian society, you can't force everybody to want to watch a bad movie. You can equally distribute resources to people so that they can make, like, art in some way, shape, or form. But that prestige comes from people deciding, this is something that I liked watching, this is something good, this is something that I enjoyed. That's not going to go away no matter kind of, you know what I mean? Like, no matter where you are or what the society looks like. That's its own kind of thing.
And under capitalism, our conception of prestige is so tied up with what are often incredibly lucrative compensation that you get for that prestige. That's how you get rewarded for doing what the society has decided is a good thing to do. But it's possible to imagine an uncoupling of those things. I mean, Peter Fraze talks about this in
I was just thinking about For Futures. Yeah, that he says that. It's not that you wouldn't, like, it was written too early to be in response to Peterson, but in response to the usual sort of Jordan Peterson point about this, it's not that status hierarchies, wouldn't exist in the communist one of the four futures. It's that you probably have lots of much more disentangled status hierarchies because they wouldn't all be organized around the central hierarchy of money.
Yeah, exactly. I think he gives the example of Wikipedia, and like people get rewarded on Wikipedia for making edits or doing certain kind of writing. And obviously there's not a financial compensation for those people, but like within that realm, there is like, you get prestige, or you get certain kinds of rewards for having done good edits or done good writing. And when within that world, you get compensated in that way. But that's a way that doesn't lead to additional economic stratification, or doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't get to feed their family or pay their rent on time. It's like, but it is your sort of form of non-economic compensation in that way.
It's interesting with people that actually want to make films, like, because I went to school for it. Like, I know a lot of people that like really want that. Most of those people don't give a fuck about the financial compensation. They want to be an artist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how they picture themselves. That's how they see somebody like Coppola. Like, they're like, this is the pinnacle, not because he's rich and can make whatever he wants. It's because he's talented and because he's an amazing artist and because he's willing to put everything on the line of that. Look at somebody like Michael Bay or something, or like the Transformer movies. They put so much fucking money into those. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants to watch them. You might be able to go to like some walk down a red.
Yeah, or lots of people went to watch when they came out, but I think it's pretentious, but I mean it's the David Hume point from The Standard of Taste that it's like what lasts, right? What are people going to enjoy at like one time in one culture, whatever, versus like what's going to be enjoyed by lots of people in lots of different countries far into the future, and so like a 100 gazillion people might see a Michael Bay movie when it first comes out, but how many people are going to watch that same movie 5 years later?
I've seen a few of those movies, and I have to tell you, like Avengers movies or whatever, and I could not tell you a single thing that I saw in any of those movies. They become the highest grossing movies literally of all time, cracking $1 billion or whatever. I can't recall a single scene, a single line, any of it. But like that's obviously not what they're for. And what a striking condemnation of how we make movies today is that like it's just this sort of this fluff that it just like it goes up and there's a flare and it disappears just as quickly it disappears. It has no kind of staying power. And certainly when you're watching a movie like Apocalypse Now, you're just like movies like this really don't get made very often. And then you watch Hearts of Darkness and then you're like, oh yeah, that's why. That's why. This is what goes into it.
Because one of the best filmmakers ever was using a tremendous amount of his own money and nearly going crazy, spending years trying to make it happen. So it's certainly not a surprise that
the crazy thing though is that he's kind of writing off the Godfather movies, like, oh, that's just something that is for the money. Absolutely, pretty much everybody's like, what's one of the greatest movies of all time? Like The Godfather. It's beautiful, beautifully shot. Like the plot, and he's like, fuck that. Like, I want to go make Apocalypse Now, and that's all I want.
Yeah, fair enough. Somebody. Joe, thank you for the super chats. The future you speak of sounds good. I'm getting really tired of this wage labor. How do I get out? Well, subscribe to Jacobin, join DSA, and if you figure out the third part of the plan, let me know.
We'll have you on the stream to explain to the rest of us.
Yeah. Absolutely.